Hi folks, I'm Matt and welcome to My Expanded Universe, a show where I go through the entire EU in chronological order as best I know how. Folks, it's time to continue on with the books, and here we're going to go with the children's book, The Followers by Jude Watson. Now this is of course another special edition of the Jedi Apprentice series, and I've talked about this before because I do like where the first half is Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and then the second half is Obi-Wan and Anakin, basically continuing that story in some way, shape, fashion, or form 10 years later. Well, in this story, you have Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon on a mission. They come across a professor, Dr. Lundy, who is obsessed with finding the Sith holocron. Of course, they stop him, and that's how it kind of ends. And the first half of these books never really ended. You know, it kind of ended for now. And so you flash forward 10 years later, and now here's Anakin and Obi-Wan, and now that they know that the Sith do exist in the galaxy, they're going back to see if they can find that Sith holocron. Now they incorporate Dr. Lundy to help them out, but they also got to face his protege, Norville. Now, of course, in the end, they're going to figure everything out, and everything's going to be great, and they're going to have the Sith holocron in the Jedi archives. And if you notice, they actually follow that story of what happened to that Sith holocron as the years go by. Because, for instance, we know that it eventually gets into the hands of Lumia way later down. And this is another classic example of how well written these books are, the continuity. It's just a little tiny thread of continuity. Someone tried to argue with me a couple of weeks ago that he thought that just fans submitted stories to Lucasfilm and they just approved everything, and oh yeah, just a bunch of fans writing the stories. They didn't talk to one another. Yeah, they did. And this is a classic example because, of course, Lumia wasn't even thought about back then for the newer books later on, but when they needed her to have a Sith holocron, where can we find one? Ah, there was one mentioned in this book here. We can use that and tell the story and just kind of keep everything in continuity instead of just poof, making something out of thin air. I love that. Now, as I'm going through the chronology, you're going to see me point to tons of threads of continuity between all the stories. That's because they're just there in abundance. In fact, to be honest, I bet I don't even know every single thread of continuity. I don't. I can tell you that. The first time reading through a lot of these books, I totally just missed that, or I didn't think about that. Yeah, sometimes it came up to where I was like, oh yeah, that was from this book, and now they're going here with it. But a lot of times, whew, over my head, until I read books like The Essential Reader's Companion, and then Wikipedia, and then talking to others online, did all these other connections start to make sense. It's just another reason why, you know, I love the EU so much. All right, folks, that's all the time we have for today. I'll see you next week with another video.